Welcome to another edition of the Mark Jackson Show. I'm Mark Jackson. We're on the Come and Talk to Me Network. This is my dynamic co-host, BLUU, my guy. We have a very special guest today, a special guest. That's a dear friend. But first, BLUU, let's pay some bills.
Hi, Pops. I'm excited, man. I'm excited. It's a big day. First off, shouts out to Underdog Fantasy. Go ahead and click the link in the description, and they are matching a deposit of up to $250. Don't forget to use the promo code MARK. That's M-A-R-K. Also, don't forget to like and comment, subscribe, show some love in the comment section for us. So back to you, Pops.
I talked about having a legend. 31 years calling Nets games, 27 years with the NFL, 27 years with CBS, Yes Network, TNT, CBS, TBS, basketball expert, tennis, football, boxing, track and field, all at an elite level. There's a special rare room for guys that have called games, and then there's a separate room. I've had the luxury and privilege of announcing games with some of the greats to ever do it. This guy is in the room with those guys. Clearly, a friend of mine and a legend, one and only Iron Eagle. Give it up.
Man,
yes, sir.
What an intro. And a Queens native. We got to get that out in the open. We share the Queens bond forever and ever, Mark.
Yes, we do. I can go anywhere with you. That's the beautiful part. People don't know I spent 3 years calling games with the Nets with you, where you were a partner, guided me, nurtured me, instilled confidence in me, and really, helped propel my career as an announcer. But more importantly, historically, your knowledge on pop culture. So I got to start there. What's your favorite TV show of all time?
BLUU, you're going to get so backed up to a different era now, because that was a thing that your dad and I had in common from day one. We could go toe to toe in 70s and 80s television, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter. If I had a Love Boat reference, he could hang with me on Captain Stubing. If I went, What's Happening? No Roger, no rerun, no rent. He could hang with me. If I mentioned Shirley Hemphill, he knew who I was talking about. If I veered into Different Strokes, I said, well, I thought Conrad Bain was very good in the role as Mr. Drummond. He was right there with me. So you think about broadcasts, we're doing NBA, you're doing 2 hours and 20 minutes on a given night. And we did not discuss one thing before we went on the air. Not one thing about, hey, I might take you here and then you could go. Everything was off the cuff. And that's why it was so authentic. That's why there was so much joy. It was real. And it was the extension of our relationship off the air, on the air. And I think that's why people gravitated towards it. So you name it. I'm a TV guy. I'm a movie guy, a book guy, music guy. I just thought it was really important as a broadcaster to not only be interested and curious about your subject matter, but also to be interesting as a person, to bring a little something more to the table and feel as if you had more to add to it than just what was happening on the court. And that's been part of the philosophy. And Mark shared that philosophy. So we were fast friends.
Well, let me write that down. Did not answer first question.
I will bob and weave on every question over the course of this chat.
Wait, I can't let us just gloss over this, because the opportunity that we have with you being here, I need to hear about what were those early years like with my pops, working with him, and over the years, did you see some improvements? Did you witness some things where you were like, yo, he's gotten better?
Yeah. No, here's the reality. Mark, he came to the table with so much ability. It was just a matter of uncorking it on the public. So Mark was working with Marv Albert and me on the play-by-play side. And then Frank DeGrace, our producer, one of the best to ever do it. Just really sharp, smart, his understanding of television, what works, what doesn't. And early on, at least Frank and I recognized that Mark had all of this untapped potential. He saw the game so well. He was so comfortable in explaining the game, but then had this whole other angle of joy and humor and seeing it from a different side and not the obvious. So we developed, over the course of 3 years, we developed features, literal features. You're better than that was all Mark. That was a Mark saying, as we know, as you probably know, Blue, from
Yeah.
day-to-day life, that became a game-to-game feature of what could we come up with topic-wise where someone didn't quite measure up to what they should have been doing. Even Jason Kidd and Vince Carter got nominated for You're Better Than That. They were stars, but they still qualified in the Mark Jackson school. So it was a lot of that. We really just had a lot of fun. And I think that connects an audience. When you hear laughter and it's genuine and people can attach themselves to it, they realize the people that are doing the game are happy to be there. We were excited to be there. And then that translated on the air.
You think about it, you say You're Better Than That, and the segment that we had. I'm watching Rocky talk to his kid, and he go, "You're better than that." I'm like,
Yeah.
that's my line. What are you
You took
doing?
your line. You
But,
took
okay.
your line. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And there are lines that people have stolen from me. I take it as an homage. I do not get offended. I just think it's an homage to a great line. So they can take it. They can have it. People, the real ones, know where it came from.
That's impressive that you're able to think that, because I got to let you know, my pops watches movies, TV shows. Leonardo DiCaprio could say You're Better Than That. He's going to be looking at the screen like, come on, man. Like,
It's all right. That's what makes him Mark. That's part of the charm. So I think what ended up happening for us, as I look back on it, I've had so many different partners. I think 156, somewhere in that range, over all the sports that I've worked. And what I found was when you had a real friendship, obviously that came across. But for me, it was always just about commonality. If you find common ground, and I'm not exaggerating, Mark can tell you this, we literally did not speak about what it was we were going to do for 2 hours plus. And it just would take on a life of its own. And we connected really early, like literally first game. I think Mark and I looked at each other. We were trying to crack each other up on the air. And I think that gave your dad an amount of calmness of, wait a second, we're putting on headsets. They're telling us to go, but we could still just be ourselves. The stuff we were saying in the production meeting, just trying to get one another to laugh and get a rise. We can do that on TV. And that was a key moment when the line blurred. You're like, no, just be you. And I don't know if anyone had ever told Mark to do that. The 1 year at ESPN prior, I think you were trying to figure it out and you weren't getting a whole lot of feedback. You're like, okay, I got to look at this from a different angle. And it came to Yes. And from the moment it started at Yes, it was a perfect match. It was truly TV magic.
Absolutely. More importantly, what's your favorite TV theme song of all time?
By the way, I avoided Blue's question as well. I never said if you improved.
You're 2 for 2.
3 years. I'm 2 for 2. I would say if I had to start ranking TV, I'm going to give you ones that are in the upper echelon. I could sit back and watch The Wire tomorrow. I could watch The Sopranos tomorrow. I could watch Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul tomorrow and be entertained. Any of those would entertain me from start to finish. I know how the series goes. I know the middle. I know the end. I still would be absolutely entertained. But if we're going back to my days as a young person trying to figure out the world, Three's Company, Mark, was a show that resonated with me. Like, think I wanted to be Jack Tripper. The guy lived with 2 women. He was on the beach in Santa Monica. He was a chef. He had his own restaurant eventually. Like, he figured out life. I was cool with that. I thought that was the way to go in life.
You know what's crazy? I got 2 more questions, but you bring up Three's Company, and it read right into my very next question. Janet or Chrissy?
I think traditional thinking would be Chrissy. She was blonde. She was a bombshell. But, Janet, for me, seemed dateable. Like I might attain it.
Let me let you know, I know Bird. I know Iron Eagle. Janet wasn't dateable for you.
I thought Janet was dateable. So I'm going to go Janet. I just thought, she was a dancer. I thought it would be a good match.
Okay, last question for me, TV wise. Do you feel the same way I feel, that Good Times was never the same after James' death?
I knew we were going to get to the John Amos section of the podcast where you questioned me as to whether or not Good Times fell off after they wrote him off the show. Never was quite the same. I mean, obviously they leaned into the Jimmy Walker character, Dynamite, JJ, Thelma obviously was a tremendous talent. Michael carried his own weight, and Florida was a A-list character, but it didn't have quite the heart that it had in season one. Is that a legitimate answer for you?
No, that was outstanding. You put it perfectly. Was there any similarities with your dad and James?
Yes, Taskmasters. No, not much. But I don't know if you know this, Blue. Mark, no, my dad was a stand-up comedian, an actor, a musician, a Renaissance man. So I grew up in a very different kind of household where I was independent. I was left to my own devices at a very young age. My parents got divorced. My mom moved to LA, eventually to Vegas. I was living more or less with a housekeeper. So I had to grow up in a hurry. By like 9, 10, I had to be in charge, get myself up for school, do my homework, do whatever I needed to do to get through the day. And it actually did help me a lot in adulthood because it forced me to mature and get to a place where I had to count on myself. So while it wasn't the typical upbringing by any stretch of the imagination, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It really did teach me a great deal. And it also showed me later in life what I wanted to be as a dad and as a husband and as a family man. It showed me the importance of being engaged and being involved in your kid's life. So it was different, but it worked for me.
I'm glad that we brought up your dad, because I heard a story that back in the day, O.J. Simpson had a commercial where he jumped over a man, and that man was none other than your father. Is this true?
That's true. That's true. The Hertz commercial, very famous commercial. My dad did about 50 commercials, and some were major, major campaigns. Won a Clio Award for the Xerox commercial. It was the first commercial that ever used a religious figure. He played a monk, and that at the time in the late 70s was not common. So it broke new ground. He did commercials for Fleischmann's Margarine and for Coppertone and for Gillette and on and on and on. But he did do a Hertz commercial. O.J. Simpson, airport in L.A., it was LAX, jumped over him as he was tying a shoe. And he flies back from that shoot. And I asked him, I'm only 9 at the time. I said, how'd it go? He said, oh, yeah, it went well. O.J., seemed like a good guy, chatted with him a bit. He said, they lost him for about 30 minutes. They couldn't find O.J., so they had to pause the commercial. I said, well, where'd he go? He said, he was in a broom closet with an extra. I'm 9. I go, oh, okay. I'm going to go play outside now. That was a real life lesson that I learned from O.J. Simpson tangentially. Yeah.
He wasn't in the broom closet with an extra.
I think he was. Yeah. I think he was.
That's breaking news on the Mark Jackson show.
There you go. Never before reported.
Now, how much of an advantage was it you having a dad that was a successful comedian and obviously his quick wit around the house?
It was an advantage in that I was not intimidated by doing this, by speaking into a microphone. My parents put me on stage. My mother was an entertainer as well, actress, singer. They put me on stage when I was 5, 6 years old, and I did impressions and played to sometimes 1,000 people in an audience in the Catskill Mountains. Concord Hotel, there were a bunch of hotels in the Catskills that they played. So very early in life, I was given encouragement that I could do this. I could go into some field that required me to be out in front and to speak into a microphone or look into a camera and make it happen. And I told them at 8 years old what I wanted to do. And both of them individually said, well, that's what you'll do. Like, no, well, let's talk it through. Maybe there's something a little more prudent. No, they said, well, you want to be a sportscaster? They weren't. My dad was not a huge sports fan. He became one because of my interest. My mom, it's funny with her. She was not a huge sports fan, but had moments along the way where she gravitated towards certain athletes and then became really interested. Like Thurman Munson, I remember now thinking about it, the former Yankee catcher who tragically died in a plane crash. She just was so taken by him and how hard he played and his demeanor. So there was something in her that did enjoy sports and enjoy the athletes that played them. Both of them said to me, that's what you'll do. And that was it. It was not talked about again. It wasn't a revisit 2 years later. Well, have you thought about it? Maybe you want to do something else. Or maybe you want to do this type of job or that. And that really did empower me to think I could do this. When you're told at a young age that you can do something by the two people that you respect the most and love the most, you believe it. And I believed it and obviously carried it through into my adulthood and a career.
That is the nicest way I've ever heard somebody say their mom's had a crush on another man. Very much.
I think she did. I think she did. And also, Blue, you should know this. I mean, Mark, whether or not he has shared this with you, but we had a broadcast where we got into talking about family, and Mark began to talk about your grandmother, his mom, how she would boast about her skills as a basketball player. And then after mentioning this story, said, yeah, I never believed her. I could always take her one-on-one and right play. She wasn't that good. So he brought us to this place where, oh, wow, Mark's mom could play. No, knocked her right back down. So I already know how this story goes. I know this song.
I have to give her credit. My mom passed away a couple of years ago, is in the Brooklyn Hall of Fame for basketball and her accomplishments. So I gave her a hard time, but
now you want to give her credit?
I think she was watching that broadcast. She was watching.
But let me ask you a question. You talked about your dad. Your mom was an accomplished singer.
Yeah.
And the story's told that one day she had you with her and she told you, could you join her to get something to eat or whatever? She was going to meet a friend.
Yeah.
That friend turned out to be Demi Moore. Your mom was friends with Demi Moore?
That is true. I flew out to LA. My mom had just gotten out there. She was there maybe 6 months. She was taking an acting class, picked me up at the airport, and we're driving now in LA. I don't know at that point if I had ever been there. I don't think I had been to LA. So my first time in LA, she said, hey, before we go to the apartment, there's a girl from my acting class, and I told her all about you and she wants to meet you. Can we go meet her first? I said, yeah, we can go meet her. Sure. I had no plans. I had nothing going on. I was 9 years old and it was Demi Moore. And we spent the day with Demi Moore. She later got General Hospital. It was right before she got General Hospital. And then there was a movie by the name, Mark will remember, Blame It on Rio, with Michael Caine and Joe Bologna. And in that film, Demi happened to be topless. So this is just 2 years removed from me meeting her. And I was allowed to see R-rated films at a young age. Again, I had very little supervision. I could do whatever I wanted. So it was a real life moment. I'm like, wait a second. I just met this girl and now I'm seeing her on screen with no top. So, I worked through that with therapy. It's good now.
You coping with it well.
Yeah, no. I bounced back. It was okay. It worked out.
But let me ask you, what is it like now, being that you've been doing this for so long? I know we're all fathers here. For your son to be becoming such a media star, what does it feel like to see him having such success? Yeah.
Blue, first of all, the second part of that question, I know you wanted to say there just wasn't enough time. You've been doing this so long, yet you look so young. How do you maintain the youthful glow, skincare products, and healthy living. Yeah,
That's what I meant. I
I
appreciate
know.
you.
I saw it in your eyes. It's been incredible, truly incredible, because as Mark can attest to, with you, Blue, and your love for basketball and following your passion, your love for music as well, which I know is very much in your blood. You want your kids to follow what they're passionate about and what they love. And by no means did my wife Elise and I ever push Noah towards this. We wanted him to be happy and be content and find something that he enjoyed doing. And when he told us that he was interested in doing this, then you go in full support. But you also go in with full disclosure that, hey, it is hard, it is challenging, it's not simple, it's not easy. You got to really commit yourself to it. And then you have to have some natural ability to build on. And fortunately, he did. He's made some really good choices along the way of where to go with his career. And he's handled the job really well, impressively well. And I've certainly been there as a sounding board for him if he's had questions. But our relationship is not just based on me schooling him on how to approach play-by-play or what you do in this situation. It's more based on father-son. And then when things pop up, we can discuss things at a different level. It has certainly added a dimension to our relationship that I didn't anticipate. And that's the common experience and what I've gone through that I now can share with him, and he understands and recognizes the things that I did when I was younger, when I was a young dad and he was a young kid, to now where he's in the field. So it's been awesome. It's been surreal as well. There are moments where my wife and I are watching TV where he pops on and we look at one another and say, what happened here? Like, how did this happen? He's doing the Olympics for NBC. He's working the basketball with Dwayne Wade on the men's side and LaChina Robinson on the women's side. It's a great assignment. I know how excited he is about it. And these are once in a lifetime moments that he recognizes that he's been very fortunate to be in this position. And by the way, he's still humble. And I've explained to him that can never go away. You have to maintain that humility. So it's been incredible for our family.
Well, congratulations with that, and I appreciate it. And you talked about it changed the dynamic of your relationship. I got a question for you because Blue, from episode 1 to now 66, his swag has gone up more. He's now controlling pre-show meetings and talking about what we should get into. How do I handle that?
I'd say the way you handle it is the way that you've always handled life, with humor and diffuse it when need be, but let Blue fly, man. He knows what he's doing. Let the man flap his wings and take over. Like, at some point, I'm gonna go to an island with beach, water, umbrella in drink. Like that's okay with me. I'm okay with that idea. I'm going to say it. I'm going to break the news right now on the program. I'm not doing this till I'm 80, play by play. It's not happening. There will be an end date. So I recognize the next generation's got to take over. And Mark, if this is your time on the podcast to maybe step aside and let Blue do his thing, so be it. Your
okay,
time,
next question, Blue. Go ahead, man.
Let's make sure we clip that. Part.
Let Blue fly.
That one I answered, by the way. I did not avoid.
So I want to ask, I don't want to get off topic. I want to keep talking about the relationship between you and your son. Recently, it's been a lot of conversations about LeBron James.
Yeah.
I know my experience dealing with being on the show with my father. There's certain things that people comment or people say about the opportunity that we received. Yeah. What type of conversations do you have with your son, or have you had on the way up, talking to him about that side of things?
Yeah, it's an excellent question and a legitimate one, and one that pops up a great deal, probably more than ever now in just the world that we're in. When he got to Syracuse, he decided to attend Syracuse again. His choice. He looked at a bunch of schools. He looked on the West Coast to USC and UCLA and Miami on the East Coast and Maryland and Syracuse and a few others, and eventually chose Syracuse, where I went, where my wife went. My daughter, who's 2 years younger than Noah, went there as well, her choice. So that was the first real challenge for him of, all right, how do I handle it? How do I navigate? And what I found for the first 2 years, he did not say his last name. Somebody would introduce themselves to him. He'd say, hey, I'm Noah. And that was it. And there were people there that did not know that we were related and didn't put two and two together. And I pulled him aside in between a sophomore and junior year when I noticed a trend was developing. So that summer, I just said, hey, Noah, look, I respect you got to do it your way. And I get all that. But don't ever be ashamed of your last name. And don't be ashamed to say it, because I've been in this business a long time. I've treated people the right way. And there's nothing that you should run away from in regards to your last name. And I didn't say, hey, change what you're doing and you need to go at it from a different approach. He eventually then embraced it more his junior year, senior year. And when he ended up graduating and some opportunities popped up, they popped up more organically from a professor at Syracuse that put his name in the running for a job on the West Coast. It ended up being the Clippers job. He had an audition for the TV job, didn't get it, but they liked him so much they offered him the radio job, and he took it and ended up spending 4 years in LA. It probably ended up being the best thing for him. 3,000 miles away, as you guys can attest to. It's a different type of sports fan in LA. They're into it, but it's not every bit and every ounce of their life. There's other stuff going on there. So he did it in a bit of anonymity and just had the opportunity to get better and improve and polish. And he really became his own man and his own broadcaster there, away from me, away from my wife. He's now back on the East Coast when this NBC opportunity popped up and a chance to move back to New York. He took it. And I think is really happy on the East Coast and the vibe that the East Coast brings. But the 4 years that LA brought for him really did speed up the process of becoming an adult and becoming a more polished broadcaster. So the conversations are still there. And I just said, look, when your head hits the pillow at night, you know what you're about. What others may say, you can listen and you can react, and sometimes you can overreact. But at the end of the day, you know the real you, and you know what you've done, and what others may think or perceive, that's their perception. By the way, usually they move on after 10 seconds of thinking about it. Most people are worried about their own stuff in life. So when you think of it in that term and through that lens, sometimes it's a little more digestible.
Well, congratulations to his success and obviously your impact on him. Watching you, as you can tell when you listen to him call games, your influence. So it's a proud moment for the Eagle family. My question to you is, who was your influence growing up? Who are the guys that you looked at and thought, I can do this, or inspired you?
Marco Baldi from St. John's. I just love that guy's game. Big Italian guy.
Only you and I know Marco Baldi.
I know. Blue's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know.
That BLUU. I grew up in Queens, so I grew up in Forest Hills. College sports was not a big deal growing up in New York until St. John's basketball with your dad started to take off. And that particular group with Walter Berry and Willie Glass and Chris Mullin and Bill Wennington and your dad and Terry Bross, was he on that squad too?
Yes.
Baldi, I think, was after the Final Four team, but it was among that era. And as a kid in Queens that was a sports fanatic, it felt like our team. So it had, no joke, a huge impact on me as a sports fan, as someone that was interested in doing this, the energy and electricity that team produced. It resonated with me. College football was was not something that was happening locally. I seemed to gravitate more towards Penn State. As a kid, it was semi-close. They won a national championship, or they were playing in the national championship one year against Alabama, and that was enough for me to feel some attachment. But St. John's took it to another level. I was really into high school basketball too when I was growing up, and I did see Kenny Smith play at Malloy, and I saw Lloyd Daniels was the best high school player that I had ever seen in person. The guy was just so gifted, and I thought, he had a chance to be a major star. He had to work his way through some stuff and finally did make it to the NBA, and then ironically was on the Nets and could not have been a nicer guy, by the way. Really just a lot of joy that he exuded in everyday life, not just in his playing style. But when I got to Syracuse, that St. John's connection went away. That ended. I was all in on Pearl and Sherman Douglas and Derek Coleman and Stevie Thompson and Ronnie Cycli and that whole group. But St. John's really did spur my love for college hoops. The guys that I looked up to as a broadcaster, I looked up to Marv Albert. He was doing the Knicks. He was doing the Rangers. He was doing the 6 and 11 o'clock news on WNBC. He was doing boxing on the weekends, NFL on weekends. He was hosting Major League Baseball pregame shows. He was the guy. And if you grew up in New York, he was everything to aspiring broadcasters. Beyond that, Al Michaels and Bob Costas and Vern Lundquist and Brent Musburger, those broadcasters definitely struck a nerve with me. I saw something in them that I just found really interesting, and I thought if I could emulate their style in any way, their approach, their humor, how they handle themselves, their vocabulary, it was something to strive for. So those are the ones that really hit home when I was young and I was impressionable. There have been so many others along the way, but during that time period, just like Mark grew up idolizing certain basketball players, and same for you, BLUU. That's how I was viewing this, of trying to lift my game to a level that you could one day be considered in that classification in some way.
Question: BLUU doesn't know, but you are expert as far as impersonations. What are you laughing at, man? Give me some of your best. Give me some of your best.
My best impersonation. I do not fancy myself an impression. I can get the gist of someone and then go with, like Bill Raftery. I've done literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games. So at some point, by osmosis, I can do it and I can sound like him. And at points, you would not be able to tell the difference on the air. Frank DeGrace, who we mentioned earlier, this is a famous story for us. We're doing a game. Kerry Kittles hits a jumper late in the game that ends up being the game winner. So we're going to commercial break, and Kerry is from Louisiana. So I, in the moment, decide that Bill Raftery, who's sitting next to me, would say something to this effect, and I just go with it on the air. I said, "Ooh, jambalaya!" And we go to break. Like literally, I hit the count, and Frank DeGrace hits the talk back to me, the little mechanism where you can talk to the announcer, and says, "Oh man, isn't Raph the best?" So I hit the talk back. I said, "That wasn't him. That was me." He goes, "No." And they had to now go back and go slow-mo on the tape and confirm that Raph was laughing underneath right at the end of jambalaya. You hear him laugh. It might have been the best impression in television history to fake out the actual producer who had no idea it was me doing Raph.
That's
Wow.
impressive.
Do you have a Marv Albert? Every New York,
Yes.
every New York
Yeah.
kid got a Marv Albert.
Everybody, Mark Jackson for 3. Yes. It's just quick. And as Mark knows, the thing with Marv that was so interesting, when you got to know him off the air, it still was him, the essence of him, But then there were little quirks with him. He'd say, "Oh, Marv, what'd you end up doing last night?" "Oh, we went to Boots Chris." So there were little little pauses. Like, oh my God, that's unbelievable. That's Marv. Legendary figure. Truly, the fact that Mark got to work with him, it was such a full circle moment. Like, he called so many of Mark's games nationally, locally. And I know Mark and I have discussed this, in the past, because I was working with him concurrently at the time. It was one of those moments where I'm sure, and I know Mark, like, every now and again had to turn around and remind himself that it's Marv Albert next to me. Like, the voice track of my youth is right here. And by the way, when he stops talking, I'm supposed to talk. So you have to get used to that idea, which Mark did. He did it beautifully.
No question about it.
I have a question. It was a lot of foods thrown around, jambalaya, a few different things, and it brought me to a question I've been holding in my back pocket. I heard that you've never had salad, vegetable, or any condiment. Come on, what's this about? I need to know.
Yeah.
Is this true?
Yeah, so not completely true. I've never had salad. That's true. I have had vegetables. I eat broccoli, carrots, celery. That's about it. And it's not true that I've never had a condiment. We went on a 5th grade class trip to Washington, D.C. This was the New York public school system where they used to have money. And they sent us, PS 101 in Forest Hills, sent us 5th grade. We go to Washington, D.C. It's now 1 o'clock. We've seen the Lincoln Memorial. We've seen the Washington Monument. And now the teachers have gotten McDonald's hamburgers. And this is 1978. And I had been thrown off my equilibrium. I got up very early that morning. We traveled to D.C. I was off my game, and they started throwing these McDonald's hamburgers, and I caught one. And, Blue, you wouldn't be familiar with this, but Mark certainly is. They didn't do it your way, McDonald's. They didn't do it. They did it their way. So because I was disoriented and I was hungry, I bit into the hamburger, and it had ketchup and a pickle. And that's the only time in my life I've ever had either. So I've never had ketchup other than that moment. I've never had mustard, and I do not eat condiments. No.
Wow, that's impressive. No, because my dad doesn't eat anything either. So I understand. I've seen it firsthand. I believe you. It's no wonder y'all get along.
That's weird. Don't co-sign.
Oh, whoa, he doesn't want to be grouped with me. He doesn't want to be grouped with me.
This dude got mad because ketchup was on a burger. That's my everyday life.
I did get mad. Now, my dad and I have the palate of a 9-year-old. That's the problem. Like, we never graduated from that time of our life. You give me a plate of chicken fingers, I'll run a train on those right now. It's not an issue. But you bring foie gras over, it's not happening. I'm not doing it. I'm not going there.
Now, did you finish the burger at 9 years old?
No.
Did you finish it? No?
No, I was disgusted, honestly. I think I might have gone on a hunger strike at that point. I think I fasted the rest of the trip. I had issues with it. It affected me.
Now, I find this interesting on another subject. You, who are one of the all-time greats doing TV, started off on the Mike and Mad Dog show, historic show, radio show out of New York City. Shout out to those guys, Hall of Famers, trendsetters. But you started off as a producer with those guys.
Yeah, I started as a producer at WFAN radio. They told me, do not take this job if you want to be on the air. And I took it anyway, even though I wanted to be on the air. I said, oh, yeah, no problem. No problem. Yeah, whatever you need. It took me about 15 months to get on the air. Somebody got sick. The cliche story, someone got sick that was supposed to do updates on a Sunday. They asked me to step in. I did it. I did well. I got put on the schedule the next week, then the next week, the week after that, and then it continued into the following year. So that was 91 into 92. So I was a producer. They then pulled me from the producing job and asked me if I wanted to run the board for Mike and the Mad Dog while also doing weekend overnight on the air. So I worked Monday through Friday with Mike and the Mad Dog and then hosted midnight to 6 a.m. on FAN from Friday night into Saturday morning, Saturday night into Sunday morning. I was working 7 days a week. I got engaged that year. I had a lot going on in my life, and I loved every minute of it. I enjoyed the grind. I enjoyed the experience. I learned a lot from Mike and Chris. I learned things that helped me when I started doing play-by-play, not in how to describe the action, but more how to build chemistry with your partner and how to attack it together and be in it as a team, because that was really the golden era for they liked each other back then. They both were at my wedding. They sat at the same table. This was before the feud really began for Mike and Chris. This was the golden era, and it was glorious. It was a lot of fun. Their popularity was on the rise in New York, and I got to see it firsthand behind the scenes. So learned a great deal. By the end of that year, they made me full-time on air, and I never was a behind-the-scenes guy again. But I look back on that 3-year period. It was 1990, 91, 92. It was like going to graduate school. I felt like I came away from that with so much more knowledge than when I started, that when I went into new roles, it didn't seem like that big of a jump, that I could do the talk show, I could do the play-by-play, I could transition to TV. I just brought a lot of confidence with me based on the experience that I got behind the scenes and just seeing it from a different point of view.
Let's talk a little bit of NBA.
Yeah.
GM Kenny Atkinson recently said that the rebuild is not going to take too long. What's your thoughts on the future of the Nets?
So on the Nets side of things, this had to happen. This was not a real difficult decision. When they got the offer from the Knicks for Mikal Bridges, they had to take it. This was a chance to start over, chance to get back involved with the upcoming drafts in 2025, 26. I think GM Sean Marks, in addition to the Houston deal that they made, realized that this was their get out of jail free card and they could do it the right way. Instead of being mediocre and hopeful and fighting for a 9-10 spot on a play-in, they hired Jordi Fernandez as the new head coach from Sacramento, and they really are starting a new chapter. Look, things have to work in your favor. Ping pong balls have to go your way. You have to be really smart in how you build the team. But they now have a puncher's chance to improve. And if they get one of these players that no one has questioned, the top 3 or 4 in the 2025 draft, guys that can have an impact, if they truly live up to the billing, they might have themselves a legitimate player to build around. But you got to make the picks, you got to hit on them, and then you got to develop talent, as Mark, you know as well as anybody. That starts from within, and that starts with the right culture, and that starts with the right attitude. And that part we don't know about. That is shown over time. That only reveals itself as the years go on. But for a starting point, they at least now have some things to build on. And that doesn't mean that you're tanking. In the NBA now, you don't benefit from a full all-out tank. The way that the lottery has changed, if you win 10 games, it doesn't give you an advantage over a team that's won 26 games. So go out, compete, try to set the tone and what it is that you're looking to do over the next 3, 5, 7 years. But start planting those seeds, and that's what this team is going to look to do now.
Well, speaking of basketball, you covered a lot of basketball, seen all of the greats. In your lifetime, who is the GOAT basketball player?
Jordan was the best that that I ever called. I got him on the second chapter of his career after baseball, and was still at that point to me the best competitor I've ever seen, the most confident player I've ever witnessed. The way that crowds reacted in his presence. There are only three players. I might add a fourth who now has galvanized a fan base when you're either on the road or at a home game. It was in my era, Jordan, Kobe, LeBron, where you just felt something different in the stands, in the arena. And now Steph Curry has brought some of that. You can feel a different energy, and just people showing up and watching him warm up. That, as obviously Mark, you can attest to as well as anybody, that's a show within a show. So I know when there are special players, but then a different presence that they bring to the court and to the venue. Jordan, to me, though, still is the one that I never felt anything like that before, and I haven't felt anything like that since. The others that I mentioned, really close in terms of the impact of their presence, but Jordan just had this otherworldly thing about him that he carried from place to place.
What's the best event that you've had the privilege to call?
I would tell you that this past Super Bowl may be up there as the one. I did it on the World Feed. I had World Feed broadcast for Jordan against the Utah Jazz. That was in Salt Lake City, the Brian Russell game. And I'll never forget the reaction within that arena, because they felt they were forcing a Game 7. You could feel it. And the way that it was set up in international TV, we were upstairs with fans, basically. They ripped out rows of seats and put in tables with monitors, and then fans would just be to the left of you or in front of you, depending upon where your location was. So I was amongst the fans calling that. So you could literally feel what they were feeling when they thought they were forcing a Game 7, and then Jordan hits the shot. And as we know, that's part of folklore and the stuff of legends. But this past Super Bowl, I did the last two on the World Feed. To watch Mahomes do his thing for Kansas City, to call it, it's overtime. The clock is a non-factor at that point. It's not a race against the clock. If he doesn't convert there, they go to a second OT as time is elapsing. But again, clock irrelevant. And he just does his thing. And they win the Super Bowl, the biggest achievement that you can possibly have in football. And this guy just keeps adding to his trophy case and to his standing as one of the greats. That one's going to rank up there. That was pretty special.
That's unbelievable. Let's give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Underdog Fantasy. Go ahead and click the link in the description and use the promo code MARK. They are matching a deposit of up to $250. We appreciate y'all.
I got one last question before I let you go. How long you been married?
Been married 31 years.
Now, Blue, think about this. I don't know if it's true, but when I worked with him, he had a streak going. I don't know if it's still sustained, but he claimed he never got into an argument with his wife.
Wow.
Like serious, drag him out. I don't think we've ever had a fight at that level. Now do we have like little pokes, maybe, but nothing serious. We don't fight. I'm a lover, not a fighter.
That's a beautiful thing.
I tell you what, man, I can't thank you enough for stopping by and spending some time with us.
Thank you
You're
so
truly
much.
a legend, a friend for life. Got love and respect for you. You know that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Ditto. The feeling's mutual, Mark. You know how much I love you from the day we met to now. It's a joy being your friend. Blue, pleasure is all mine to get to hang with you in this instance. Hopefully I'll get to see you in person out on the West Coast at some point, but this has been an honor.
Definitely.
Thanks so much for having me. Do you want to do any more 70s, 80s TV stuff, or are we good? We're good?
But, you know, one of the most underrated theme songs of all time was the Gary
Maud?
Shandling.
Was it Maud?
Gary? No. Oh, I know I want to ask you. Jeff Van Gundy believes that Hawaii Five-0 was the greatest show ever.
Look, Bookem Dano was a tremendous tag. The theme song was there. That was a banger. Don't get me wrong, but greatest show ever. Come on now. Come on. No. JVG says a lot of stuff.
Yeah, no question. Well, thanks so much. That's a wrap for the Mark Jackson Show. I'm Mark Jackson. That's the dynamic one, Blue. Our special guest, Iron Eagle. We thank him so much. Love and support. We're on the Come and Talk to Me network. Remember, I got a barber friend of mine who just recently had his braces taken off after being inspired by his sister, his sister who had bad teeth, and he had bad teeth for a long time. She had the braces taken off. Teeth were spotless. All of a sudden, a month ago, after this process, he's cutting my hair. He's smiling from ear to ear, and he's gloating about this new pearly whites that he have, flawless. I said, what took you so long to get braces? He said something that blessed me. Most incredible thing. He said, I had gotten comfortable with being crooked. Now, he's talking about his teeth, and I'm talking about you right now. Your crooked attitude, your crooked professionalism, your crooked approach. Aren't you tired of it? It is time to get straight. Blessings.